to this town hall to discuss a bright future for municipal utilities in Illinois. My name is Susan Russo. On behalf of Tri-Cities Clean Energy, I thank all of you for being here tonight. I also want to thank our co-sponsors for helping with this event, our statewide partners at Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, Sierra Club, Citizens Utility Board, Prairie Rivers Network, and Vote Solar, along with our local partners in Naperville and Winnetka, Naperville Environment and Sustainability Task Force, or NEST, Say No to Coal, Go Green Winnetka, and Winnetka Future Energy Coalition. And finally, a thank you to BATV for live streaming this town hall and recording it for future viewing on the BATV YouTube channel. I have lived in Batavia for 40 years. For 37 of those years, I worked as an attorney in Kane County, first representing school boards, and then individuals with their estate plans, real estate transactions, and estate settlements. I served as president of the Batavia Library Board during the construction of our current library building, and as a member of the League of Women Voters, I helped Kane County residents register to vote and become informed voters. I also supported historical, educational, and environmental causes. When I retired in 2022, all of these causes still mattered to me, but I had also become a grandmother. There they are. I looked at my grandchildren and realized how different their lives might be from my own. I saw that climate change would impact their future health and affect their opportunities for success. The urgent calls to do something about climate change became personal. I am certain that you who are here tonight are experiencing similar unease for the futures of your children and grandchildren. I started my advocacy in climate change by becoming an ambassador to promote the benefits of Illinois' Clean and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA. That put me in touch with Greg Hubert of Naperville and Scott Allen of the Citizens Utility Board. They both encouraged me to join the Municipal and Cooperative Electric Utilities Working Group of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition. There, I met a host of interesting and dedicated people from all over the state of Illinois, including Geneva, Highland, Springfield, Naperville, Waterloo, and Winnetka. Although we and our communities are very different, we focus on our common problem: dependence on the Prairie State coal-burning power plant in southern Illinois that supplies our municipal utilities and cooperatives with the electricity we use and depend on every day. As of 2023, Prairie State ranked number 7 in the United States for greenhouse gas emissions, the undeniable cause of climate change. I then joined forces with Bill Kale of Geneva and Debbie Motter of St. Charles. Debbie, stand up. Bill, stand up. To address issues related to Prairie State in the Tri-Cities region. Since late 2023, we have slowly built a coalition of Batavia, Geneva, and St. Charles residents, some of whom are here tonight, who are concerned about climate change and the 3 cities' long-term contracts for electricity from Prairie State. Together, we have had some major successes. First, We co-sponsored our first community meeting, Tri-Cities Coal Problem and What We Can Do About It, in November 2023. We urged the St. Charles City Council to not sign the IMEA contract for electricity through 2055 until it had considered other alternatives. St. Charles is committed to completing its due diligence and understanding its options before making an energy decision for 2035 and beyond. We asked Batavia City Council to engage in future energy planning. Batavia recently commissioned a series of electric utility and energy studies. And we co-sponsored a second public forum entitled Bright Future St. Charles, Transitioning to a Clean Energy Future, in January of this year. Joining forces with the Naperville Environment and Sustainability Task Force and Winnetka Future Energy Coalition, we are asking the governing bodies of Naperville, St. Charles, and Winnetka to adopt a 6-step process to achieve a transparent and cleaner energy future. These 6 steps include providing a meaningful opportunity for community engagement, developing a set of clearly stated and proven sustainable energy goals, conducting city council and village board workshops, which lead to the development of a comprehensive energy strategy that can undergo a rigorous evaluation process before a path forward is selected. And I'd like to recognize tonight Ted Burlard. Stand up, Ted. He's with Nest from Naperville. And he's I have to give Nest, this is from Nest. So we've kind of adopted their 6 steps to transparent and cleaner energy futures. But we're not stopping. We are not stopping. CEJA has created some amazing opportunities for most Illinois residents to access clean electric power with solar and wind resources. However, these opportunities are largely denied to customers like us in the Tri-Cities and in Naperville and in Winnetka, who get their electricity from municipal utilities. In order to continue making progress in Illinois on greater energy efficiency, providing all residents access to clean energy resources, and ensuring that we have a resilient and reliable power grid, we are asking the Illinois legislature to pass the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act. We urge you to join all of us in asking Illinois legislators to pass this act this spring. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Christine Nanicelli with the Sierra Club to talk to you about the act a little bit further.
Thank you, Susan. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Okay. Let's give folks another round of applause for all of the hard work happening across the communities in Illinois, and especially in St. Charles, in Naperville, and in Winnetka. And give yourselves a round of applause for coming out. You guys are doing the work of ratepayers of a public power utility. That is your job, because oversight falls to you on the ground. These guys don't report to the Illinois Commerce Commission, they report to you and your city council. So it involves doing this organizing work, taking a hard look at these questions facing your utility. That's what it requires. So amazing work, and thank you. And I see a lot of familiar faces that have come out. Susan and Debbie keep bringing me back here. Eventually, you'll ask me to stop coming, but it's been very cool to see the journey over the past several months, over a year, where this work has come from and where it is now. So I want to talk a little bit, stepping back, thinking about what moved Susan into action, what moved myself into action, climate change. We are a climate leader, no question, in terms of taking action as a state. And we'll talk just briefly about the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. But I want to remind folks, we are also one of the biggest climate polluters in the nation. Even after passing historic, groundbreaking climate legislation. We have a very energy-intensive economy, is the reality. And that's why we have, at the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, a comprehensive platform looking to power, essentially, an entirely 100% clean energy economy. This is about improving air quality. It is also about having a resilient power grid, an affordable power grid, and making sure that as we continue to electrify our vehicles and our homes, we are doing so with clean, renewable energy, battery storage. That is a key part of our vision, along with having an equitable, clean energy economy, where we're putting more people to work, and especially those in environmental justice communities that have been disproportionately burdened by energy pollution. And in the fossil fuel industry, as we're transitioning away from fossil fuels, making sure that they're some of the first ones in line to get new jobs and building quality careers and businesses in the clean energy economy. So, yes, we're doing well. We still have a long way to go. And part of the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act is to make sure that we are prepared and ready to electrify other key parts of our economy. And, I want to, step back a little bit. When we passed CEJA in 2021, just a show of hands, how many folks were part of any efforts to pass that legislation? A couple of, okay. All right, excellent. Thank you, guys. The good news, we're making great progress on clean energy. We're seeing over 5,000 megawatts of clean energy alone from this act that has been brought online in the last couple of years because of this law. That's some pretty significant clean energy growth. A lot in the solar industry. We're seeing small-scale projects as well. Homes are putting solar panels up on their roofs. We're seeing some good progress. The Havana coal plant in far southern Illinois closed a couple of years ago. That plant brought in $1 million in local tax revenue. Now, thanks to wind and solar, it brings in $2 million in revenue, doubling the amount of the tax base that it has. So we're seeing improvements in critical parts of the legislation we've already passed. And another key milestone, clean energy surpassed coal for the first time in collective generation last year in the United States. And not only this, but we're seeing clean energy play an increasingly critical part of our power grid, even when it's pushed to the brink, like during winter storms. We've seen a few winter storms come through the Midwest over the last couple of years. Wind has been some of the most important parts of maintaining that grid resiliency, and we've seen, conversely, power plants, gas plants, coal plants that have not shown up just like we thought they would. So clean energy is affordable and it's reliable. It's working, and a big part of our work moving forward is figuring out how do we accelerate. So since then, though, we have some challenges, and Susan mentioned, from the municipal cooperative, the public power side of things, this commitment to the right to self-generate. has not been fully realized. Some of the other challenges that we're seeing since we passed CEJA, we are seeing now unprecedented load growth. So the demand for power is now growing at an unprecedented rate. It used to be generally flat. Now, we're seeing load really skyrocket in ways we haven't seen before. And a big contributing force of this is the surge in data centers that are incredibly energy intensive. And we are one of the top targets in the nation for data center growth. And so we're looking at an analysis that Sierra Club, the Clean Jobs Coalition commissioned. We see prices starting to rise generally, and we'll talk about why that is. A lot of it is making sure that supply is keeping up with demand, but also we're seeing data center growth is really stretching the capacity on the grid. And so we're seeing a lot of bill impacts. The risk to ratepayers is significant. So this is a huge threat since the passage of CEJA, and the big question is, how will we meet this new demand? Will it be with clean energy? Will it be with fossil fuels, as we're seeing other states? And who will pay the costs? So that's one of the key things we have to address in legislation. Another challenge. We have an old power grid. I think I mentioned this in one of our last events here. We are trying to build a 21st century clean energy economy with a 20th century power grid. Our regional power markets that are responsible for grid reliability, they are long overdue in making updates to our transmission lines, and that has caused a lot of congestion in not being able to bring hundreds and hundreds of new clean energy projects that are waiting to come online and connect them to our power grid. This has been a huge challenge, and we need to make sure that we are addressing this. And so overall, we're seeing across, not just Illinois, but across the country, we're seeing more and more ratepayers subject to price volatility, sudden spikes. ComEd ratepayers are going to see a $20 a month spike beginning in June. Ameren customers are going to see probably a $30 a month spike in their bills this summer. We need to make sure that we have solutions to address and insulate our customers and our power grid and our climate in navigating these challenges. And there is an important role for munis and co-ops to play in all of this. So at the big picture level, here's what we know are the best ways to meet these challenges that prioritize customers, the power grid, and our climate first. One, we need to accelerate the growth of clean energy and battery storage. We need to put the pedal to the metal on clean energy, and part of that is with battery storage. We see some growth in battery storage in Illinois, not nearly enough, and that's a really key part of meeting our projected needs. Second, we need to reduce demand on our power grid through energy efficiency. This is the cheapest energy resource. It's the power we don't use. And that helps to really cut into that growth in demand. Three, we need to strengthen our transmission infrastructure so we can get more clean energy projects up online and moving power more efficiently across the grid. We need to improve state energy planning, not just for the state, but for munis and co-ops as well. And we need to make sure large energy customers, like data centers, pay their fair share. And so this is why we introduced the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, a comprehensive suite of proposals, policies to meet this pivotal moment that we find ourselves in. And so for folks that are worried about the federal circumstances that we find ourselves in and rollbacks in climate progress, to the extent that it gives you any degree of comfort, maybe not, but something that is very exciting, we have an opportunity to make sure that Illinois can and will continue to lead on climate and demonstrate to the rest of the country how we can hold these three things at the same time: affordability, grid resiliency, and climate action. So as I mentioned, one of our first policies here, we need to set nation-leading energy efficiency policies. And that's what we are proposing to do. Increasing ComEd and Ameren's electric energy savings goals. Every year, we want them to take a look and to capture and to reduce demand by 2% of their entire load projections. So if you think we're going to grow our load, let's say by 4% because of data centers, we're asking ComEd and Ameren to capture 2% of that, cut it in half. For every $1 that we invest in energy efficiency, maybe it's weather stripping your home, insulating your crawl space, all those different types of measures that you can use to insulate your home, you see ultimately $3 in utility bill savings. These are good investments and they're good for our power grid. And over 70% of the clean energy jobs are in energy efficiency. I know we like to think of folks constructing wind turbines and solar panels. Most of the jobs, this is where the beating heart of the clean energy economy is. As I mentioned, accelerating clean energy and storage. Yes, we have a clean energy portfolio standard in Illinois, but we need more tools to figure out how to accelerate clean energy. So we have a couple of proposals on how to do that. I think the two main ones I want to highlight for us for the sake of time. One, we need a storage procurement plan. We don't have one in Illinois. We have targets to build more clean energy, more solar and wind. We don't have one for storage. We need that. This is one of the most critical resources that we're seeing the most investment in across the country. And it allows us to store energy from wind, from solar, and then deploy it back onto the grid when it's needed most. As we look to hit our climate goals and begin to take more fossil fuels offline, that's when we need battery storage. When we come home after a day of work and the sun starts to go down, that's when we start to see gas plants ramp up. That's when we need storage to come on. So that's a key part of this equation. Next, we need better modeling and planning from the state. Most other states get together every 2 years and do comprehensive energy planning and say, okay, what is our load? What are our projected energy needs? And what are the resources? What are the most cost-effective resources to meet those needs? We propose doing that and making sure that we're informing our clean energy procurement targets. How much wind, how much solar, how much storage do we need to actually meet our grid resiliency demands? This would be revolutionary in terms of how we do state energy policy in Illinois. Improving transmission infrastructure. Again, these are our interstate highways. We gotta update these lines. This is not something we can control entirely on our own, but there are a couple of tools that we have at the state level to do so. And again, this is about making sure that we're maximizing every new power line, and where it's cost effective, any existing power line where we can be modernizing that technology, squeezing every electron out of it so we can bring more clean energy online. That's what we need to do. And make it easier to develop and build more transmission lines across our state. And we need to make data centers pay their fair share. They can be clean energy drivers, but they need to do so in a way that doesn't leave ratepayers on the hook for that. So what we have proposed is how many folks have gone to a barbecue and you were asked, bring your own beer, BYOB? How many folks have been? That we're essentially saying that, except the term we're using is Beyonce. Bring your own new clean energy with you. You have significant energy demands unparalleled with any other customer. You have to be running 24/7, literally, maybe absent 6 hours out of the year. No other customer operates like this. You need to meet your own energy demands. You cannot just plug into our grid and drain it of the resources and of the goals that we have. So we have made this proposal, and we want to make sure that they are footing the bill and not putting any of the costs of building out the grid to meet their needs onto other customers. We have some other key consumer protections that help us to take reduced demand on our power grid, help customers to insulate themselves from price volatility, and protecting low-income customers. Suddenly navigate a huge price spike of 20 bucks a month, there's a lot of families that can't handle that. We have some of the highest shutoffs in the nation for utility bills. We need to have better protections. So next, I want to talk just at the big picture, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Covey here from Vote Solar. But where do munis and co-ops fit into all of this is the key question. Many of these same principles apply. Customers need access to solar. They need ability as ratepayers to reduce their demand, reduce their utility bills. And we need to make sure that there's line of sight to energy planning, especially for munis and co-ops that own power plants, generating resources. ComEd and Ameren don't own anything anymore. You guys are captive customers, and the most basic energy practice that we see other utilities do around the country is energy planning. Covey will talk about integrated resource planning. I think I mentioned this in my last presentation in St. Charles, but this is a key part of making sure that as demand is growing, how are the munis and co-ops planning to meet that? If a data center comes to Batavia, to Naperville, what's the plan in that instance? We have these great goals in CEJA to decarbonize, to have a retirement date for Prairie State. Do you know how much clean energy needs to be built to replace that plant? That's energy planning to make sure that folks are staying on track to hitting their goals and maintaining a reliable power grid and doing so in the most cost-effective way to consumers. And a key part of that as well is making sure that you guys have access to these decision points. Again, you're not part of ComEd and Ameren that has to file plans and has to go through dockets at the Illinois Commerce Commission with rigorous consumer oversight and regulation. They report to you. You have to have access to the democratic tools. You need to be able to access meetings. You need to be able to participate, ask questions, have a planning process where you actually get to cast your vote and say, hey, this is the energy that I want to power my home. That's your voice. It will not work without that. So this is about proposing common sense democratic norms to strengthen that local control, that local democratic participation, to make sure that we're meeting this moment of growing demand, of challenges in energy markets, and we're hitting our climate goals and responding to the climate crisis. So munis and co-ops play a critical role in this, and we've proposed not more oversight from the state, because that's not the model. We've proposed democratic solutions that come back to you to participate in, because you guys own and oversee your own utilities. It comes back to you, but you need the tools to do this. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Covey to walk through integrated resource planning and the Solar Bill of Rights.
Cool, thank you, Christine, and thanks everyone for being here today. As Christine said, my name is Covey. I'm with Vote Solar. We're a national nonprofit. I specifically work in Illinois policy. I want to go back to the title of what this event is, which is Bright Future, putting the public back in public power. And I also think there's a little bit of a double entendre with the word power, because power, is how we power our electricity and everything, but it also is the power we have in this room today. And I think there's a lot we could do with legislation, but ultimately that legislation won't go anywhere unless we have the people power to make it happen. And y'all showing up today, and I know some of you have been doing this a lot longer than I have, is really an important step aside from just words on a page. So Christine introduced integrated resource planning really well. This is a really important way for munis and co-ops to be able and be required to do comprehensive planning in order to figure out what mix of renewables, et cetera, is needed to meet the demands of the power grid in muni and co-op territories. So you can see on the right a typical IRP process diagram. It requires really a lot of data and modeling and insight from consumers that isn't being done right now. So as Christine mentioned, there's often, a lot of guessing that comes with how much wind do we need, how much solar do we need, et cetera. This would require munis and co-ops to actually figure those numbers out, so we're not just guessing every year. We, meaning public utilities, are not just guessing what that mix needs to be. So there is a very rigorous process that munis and co-ops would go through in order to figure out how the distribution would be. And more importantly, perhaps, in that process is that ratepayers like y'all would be involved really, from the beginning and throughout the entire process to make sure that the public is being put in the public power and that you guys have a chance to decide if the portfolio that is generated is actually viable, or if maybe there are tweaks that y'all think are necessary based on the data that you see yourself. And I, as a nerd, think that's really cool. I think it's great for folks, first of all, to have an opportunity to participate in the democratic process. It also is a way for really citizens to participate in the science and the data analysis part of transparency, of modeling, and of resource planning. So it's for nerds and it's for non-nerds, it's for everyone. And I think it's a great way for us to make sure the clean energy transition is reaching everyone in the state of Illinois, whether you're served by ComEd or Ameren or a muni and co-op. The other half of the equation, specifically in the SURJA Act, is the Solar Bill of Rights. So some of y'all in this room probably have experienced this. Oftentimes it's really difficult for folks under muni and co-ops to get access to solar. So if you live in a certain area, maybe it's hard to get solar installed on your roof for a variety of reasons. And maybe someone served under ComEd or Ameren doesn't run into those same hurdles. So we want to make sure that everyone who lives in a muni or co-op territory is able to access solar and be a part of that clean energy transition, just like everyone else in the state of Illinois, both to be a part of the transition and also to be able to enjoy the benefits and the financial incentives that come along with getting solar. So some of the key provisions in the Solar Bill of Rights, as it's called, which I'll also mention that this was built up and written by many people who have faced some of those practices that have been kind of discriminatory against muni co-op people, and folks from businesses who have also run into these issues. So first of all is fair and transparent financial credit for solar energy sent to the grid. So this essentially means if you have solar on your roof and you end up generating more than you use, whatever you send back to the power grid, you should be able to know how much money you're going to get back for that. If you're sending it over, to your neighbor, you should be able to get a viable amount of money that actually makes sense, and the utility shouldn't be getting, most of the cut of it. And that should be fair, and it should, again, be transparent. So if you decide to install solar on your roof, you actually know what you're getting into and what the financial benefits might be for you. Next is some of our friends have run into issues with installation fees for solar related both to insurance minimums and interconnection fees. So essentially there's one example where someone wanted to get solar installed and they happened to be the first person in the line who ended up needing to pay for new interconnection fees, and it just happened to be where they were in the queue to get solar installed. So that's not fair, that's really luck of the draw, and we should really be making those limits affordable and really having the utilities pay for those interconnection fees, because ultimately that will benefit the grid and everyone. Insurance minimums also, there's sometimes exorbitant fees from different munis and co-ops that are necessary to install, and there should be a minimum for that. Thirdly, third-party arbitration. So right now, there's no way for folks to go and file a claim essentially against their public utility with a third party arbitrating that. It's generally just ends up a lot of times being a dead case because utilities have all the power in that situation, and that's not what public participation means, right? We want there to be fair oversight of that in ways that you would want for any legal battle. Next is honor contracts for legacy systems. So this is for folks similar to the first point. If you install solar, again, you're making an investment. Yes, you might want to be contributing to the clean energy transition, but also you have financial reasons for that as well. And we are now seeing that a lot of folks under munis and co-ops don't get to, their contracts aren't honored at the point of installation. Instead, when the pricing changes midway, they get, their contract suddenly changes. That isn't fair. That's not how any contracts I know work in the real world. So we want people to be able to have legacy systems and have their contracts be honored from the time that their systems are energized. And lastly, we want everyone, again, to be able to access solar. So one of our friends, Tom, who lives in Waterloo, isn't able to get solar on his roof for a variety of reasons. He's in a certain electric cooperative, I believe, that doesn't allow for power purchase agreements, which basically could mean that instead of buying the solar to put on his roof, he could have it on there and basically, it's kind of like renting it out. However, his siblings live just a couple miles up the road and they're able to do that. So this brings in kind of another big picture thing, which is that we want these provisions to be in the bill so that y'all can be aware of the standard across the state. Right now, there are no standards. Right now, it's really based on whim of where you live and where you happen to have your family, etc. It's not based on what is fair across the state. So we really want there to be standardization so that you know what you're getting into and there isn't a hodgepodge of policies across the state. So with that, we have a few calls to action. Hopefully you feel really motivated after all of that presentation to do something. And again, y'all are here and that's the first step. So first of all, we ask that you tell your lawmakers to support the SURJA Act and specifically ask them to support the IRP transparency and the Solar Bill of Rights. And then we also ask that you attend our Climate Action Lobby Day on May 21st. I think if you scan this QR code, it will take you to the Google form, and you do not have to have any experience. They're free buses from across Illinois to take you to Springfield. You'll get matched with the lobby captain. I'm a lobby captain, so maybe you'll get me. And you'll get to go lobby your lawmakers and tell them why you support this act. It'll be a fun time and a great way to get your feet in there, and then you'll get bused back home and it'll be really impactful, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. And then lastly, get involved locally. So Susan, especially at the beginning, mentioned a bunch of groups locally that work on this stuff out here, and a great way to make sure that these things are being thought of all year round is to get involved with those groups and build community with people who are like-minded and value-aligned and want to also make the clean energy transition be a central part of all of Illinois. So I think that's it. You can scan that QR code, and we're happy to take any questions from that.
Yes, we do want you to have an opportunity to ask any questions. Since it's being filmed, we need everybody to, speak into the phone, microphone, not the phone. And maybe the easiest way would be to come up here and ask the question between me and Christine and Kavi. We can get an answer for you. So, Maureen Stillman, hi! Maureen's another Naperville friend.
I have a question.
Sure. I didn't see you, I didn't get to introduce you.
I snuck it. Susan, since you're the lawyer,
No, I'm retired.
Okay, one issue is when these companies come to talk to cities about data centers, they make everybody sign an NDA. And this happened in Naperville, so you can't get very much information about what's going on. And right now, there's a big fight in Alabama. I think it's called Bessemer, Alabama, over a project Marvel. It's a huge data center that's supposed to go in, and they're gonna cut down all these trees, etc. So I just was wondering if you have an opinion on, I did talk to city council members in Naperville about this data center as they were considering it, but you get a few questions answered and then they say, well, we can't tell you that, or we can't, and that's what's happening in Bessemer as well. So they'll only go so far. So is there anything we can do about that? And by the way, just so you know the outcome, they did not end up putting the data center in Naperville. We believe it went to Aurora. But again, we don't know 100%, but we do know it did not get into Naperville.
Well, I don't have an opinion because I can't express an opinion, okay? Since I am no longer licensed on a lawyerly basis. So, but I think that does speak to the need for that 6-step process. And if municipalities, whether they're in Alabama or in Naperville or here in St. Charles, I think it's important that these decisions are made with meaningful community input, with a clear set of goals in mind, and that the city councils and village boards that run these utilities have the information that they need and the input from their constituents and ratepayers and the data that is required for projects like these data centers before they make a decision. And unfortunately, what we're seeing in municipal utility decisions and in cooperative board decisions is they are missing those first 3 components: community involvement and engagement, clear set of goals, and an informed city councils and village boards and cooperative boards that are given an opportunity to hash these things out in workshops, community meetings, and board meetings, council meetings. So I would say, I think that's why we need to strive for those 3 things in particular. And then at that point, if those things are done, then these problems are going to flesh themselves out. And we're going to become aware of what things we can learn about and what things we can't learn about, because if you are dealing with a private company, yes, a lot of times, they have proprietary information and that sort of thing. But that does need to be protected, or that they want to have protected. But I think if we get those 3 things, that minimizes decisions being made without full information and in secret. Sure.
I just want to let you know that in Naperville, we were told at a public utility board meeting, for any data center that wants to come into Naperville, we have, I don't know if it's a policy or what it's called, but they have to pay for the water and for any new transformers for the electricity. They have to pay for all that infrastructure. That is a requirement before they even can put the shovel in the ground to build the data center. So that much we are protected from right now. But then there's more of it, and that is once that gets done, which obviously in the case I said it did not happen, then we have to go to the IMEA, and the IMEA will get capacity. They have a problem too, because sometimes these data centers get canceled. So just recently, Microsoft canceled a bunch of data centers that were supposed to go into Ohio near Columbus. So IMEA has the risks on its end, is if it goes and procures electricity for this big data center, and then suddenly they go, no, we're not going to do it. So there's a problem there too. So there are multiple layers of issues, and look, I just wanted to share that information. I don't know what St. Charles policy is. Thank you.
Right, and I don't either. And that's something for people who are from St. Charles here, is to ask. Ask your alderperson, what kind of policy does the city of St. Charles have for data centers? I mean, you might be surprised. They might have a very clear set of criteria. They might not have anything, so that's one place to start, So I don't know the answer. That's not an inquiry we have. I don't think, Deb, we've ever inquired about. Yes.
Yeah, I think this also speaks to why we need integrated resource planning. Because in theory, you should be, if the utilities are doing an IRP, they need to project their load. You need to be identifying what your potential customer base is going to be. So the IRP should capture potential data centers in those load forecasts. And then you actually have a resource planning model to figure out, okay, how do we meet that demand? So that is one tool. It is not bulletproof. The Open Meetings Act, Maureen, as you know, has some challenges around it. That said, in addition to fighting for CEJA, the SERJA Act, and to get IRP requirements, we are fighting hard to get the data center requirements to apply across the board, not just in ComEd, Service Territory, and Ameren. This is going to be hard. This is really challenging, in part, right, because munis and co-ops, there's not state oversight. So why should the state make such requirements on munis and co-ops? We would argue that there's a helpful framework and safeguards, and there is an important interest for all ratepayers and our grid to have those protections. We're going to fight real hard in the last couple weeks of session to get that across the finish line. But if we don't get there, we need to get the IRPs, and we need to make sure, as Susan said, you need to find out those policies. That is your job as public power ratepayers. What are the policies? They need to pay 100% of their costs, and they need to bring 100% of their power. And it needs to be clean. It needs to be new, and it needs to be locally deliverable. Because the two costs that we have are the costs of building your grid lines, generation or distribution and transmission to interconnect to bring the new facility online. But then you have increases to energy and what's called capacity costs. So the cost to keep the grid strong when it's stretched to its peak. You counter that by making sure that they are required to bring their own additional new clean energy. They foot the bill for that. Does that make sense? kind of, this is hard, but this is the job of the public power ratepayer, to make sure you guys are providing that oversight.
Hi, thanks. I just had a question on that topic. Is there a precedent from any other states that have successfully required data centers to bring their own power, clean?
We're seeing, so this is like an emerging topic. We're seeing a lot of state policy proposals across the country. We're seeing a lot of states require tariffs to protect against that first layer of cause. Yeah, I know, sorry. Not a great term, but to protect against the distribution and the grid costs of interconnecting that new load and making sure other ratepayers don't have to pay for those. We're seeing there's a clean energy tariff in Nevada that has elements of a cost requirement on data centers to bring additional load, and it has to be clean. So I think our proposal, depending on what it looks like, certainly what we've proposed is I would say pioneering. So again, hopefully we can be a national leader and demonstrate this. But the unfortunate thing is we're seeing a lot of cautionary tales from other states where they're seeing a big increase in building new gas plants, right? How do your utilities propose to meet this? Is it by building a new fossil fuel plant, right? To meet that load that everyone pays for? These are really big, critical decisions, and it needs your guys' engagement, and as well as a planning tool, such as an integrated resource plan, to make sure we're tracking each community's local load needs and really assessing what are the right resources to meet that load with your guys' involvement, checking and making sure that they're making the most cost-effective decisions. We know that historically there isn't the best track record on that, right? Okay.
Any other questions? I put this slide back up because I do have an example, and I want to say first, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the City of Batavia has commissioned 4 utility studies. One of them is an IRP, an integrated resource plan. They're also going to study the infrastructure within the City of Batavia, the rate structure, and then making a plan for energy based upon, future projections, that sort of thing. So they contracted for these studies in January of this year. They had a public meeting on March 25th, where the company that's doing the studies told us what kind of studies they were doing, when they were going to do them, and when the results were going to be presented to everyone. And so I've been kind of engaging in conversation here over what does community engagement mean. And right now, Batavia is telling us that that was a community meeting. They're saying basically that a public meeting is community engagement. But that's not what we mean here. We mean we need to know what are the goals that you are trying to achieve? What are you looking for? What are the weighted factors going to be? Are you going to weigh actual monetary cost more than environmental cost? Or what kind of combination of all those costs are you going to have? That's what we mean by community engagement, the ability to tell our utilities that this is what we would like to see in our future energy portfolios. The second part, I know that the city of Batavia, for example, has a couple of statements within its strategic plan that say that it's going to strive for clean energy in the future. But to my knowledge, they do not have a clearly defined set of energy goals. What we want to see in the next 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, 30 years from now. Not that those goals are going to be fixed in stone, but that they need to be benchmarks where we can measure future decisions against. And then third, I know that the city council has been informed all along the way, but has the city council had any true workshop, give and take discussions about this integrated resource plan? I don't think they have been, but I don't think they have been. So, essentially they're skipping right to the development of a comprehensive energy plan. And then, they're going to present it when it is done and we get to comment on it. That's what they are planning to do in this process. So that's what we're talking about here, is that has to change. We believe that has to change because this is our energy future. This is going to affect our rates, our families, our community, and how that community is perceived in the world. And we need to have a say in that. So. Anybody else have any other questions? Maureen, you want to say something else?
So just one more story about why what they're outlining is so important. In the state of Tennessee, Musk came in, he talked, he talked directly to the electric utility, had them all sign NDAs, got an agreement to open up a data center in South Memphis. The representative on the city council from South Memphis was sitting there watching TV and saw the announcement, hey, a data center has been approved in her district, and she didn't know anything. So she was furious. The whole city council was left out of the process. So I'm just telling you that these companies are desperate to put data centers to power their AI systems. And this kind of stuff, we have to be careful. And I'm really glad that there's this legislation in the works. That's why this is so important. These things have really happened. The two stories I've told you, Bessemer, it hasn't been approved yet. They're still fighting. The residents hired a lawyer. But in the state of Tennessee, this actually did happen. The data center went in without the constituents in South Memphis. The other thing that's important is these data centers do not employ a lot of people. So for example, some of them, you only need like 50 people to run the whole thing. So if anybody tries to tell you, hey, this is job creation, et cetera, it's not. After the data center went in South Memphis, job requests went out, but they were for jobs in San Francisco, people doing AI. And they're, are going to do it from their laptop. So those were jobs that did not go to South Memphis. They hired about 50 people.
Is the
Hey,
solar,
Mavis, can you come up and, so that they can record it?
so I'm looking at so many good things up here, and I'm wondering, is the solar bill of rights included in Surja?
Sure.
Okay, good, okay.
Yes. Linda?
I will admit that I'm a ComEd customer and I'm kind of happy about that. I was trying to fight this, I think back, 2006, when the league was working on it. And what has always bothered me is here you have a little tiny city councilman, and unlike ComEd or the other ones, you don't have the fleet of lawyers to make sure that these are even. And it seems like this bill that you're talking about would kind of help even the whole thing. But as a ComEd customer, I have real-time pricing. I charge my EV in the middle of the night. Sometimes I get paid to do that. And I mean, there's things that the IMEA just does not allow you to do that doesn't make sense. And this really does need to be passed. Comment rather than question.
Anyone else?
Susan, could you put the slide up that has the two bills on it?
The two bills, yes, I can. I think it's way at the end, so be patient. Oh. Did I pass it? No. No, okay. I think right there. That one? Is that what you wanted? Okay. Yeah, it's called the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, or SURGA, they're saying. So,
Thank you.
we like our acronym. Patty?
I'm not a science person, but I have a question about the legal liability, yes. How can a public entity that is elected by us be forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement when they are doing business for us? Is that, I mean, I'm a social worker, but that doesn't seem legal to me. I mean, it seems like we ought to be fighting that crap too. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how many know this. The city of Batavia requires its aldermen to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I do not believe St. Charles does or Geneva does, and I don't know, I've not looked into Naperville or Winnetka at all. But they're not forced to sign it. We have had some aldermen in the past who refused to sign it on the theory that they are representing the public, us, and if anything they learn about, you know, the power plant and the electric utility, they should be able to share that with their constituents. I don't believe that question has ever been really investigated or researched to have an answer. I would like that, to see somebody do that, but that costs money. And, you know, I think just on its face, it doesn't definitely have some conflict of interest kind of implications.
If they're doing that with things like this, what else are they doing?
Well, that confidentiality agreement specifically says that it references Prairie State and the Northern Illinois Municipal Power Agency, or NIMPA. Okay.
Which we own.
Which we are membership, we're members of Batavia and Geneva are members of NIMPA, and through our membership in NIMPA, we are beneficial owners of a small portion of Prairie State. So, but what I was told is if somebody didn't want to sign, that's fine, but they wouldn't be included in any closed meeting discussions about the Prairie State or NIMPA. Now, what I'm also being told is that they either have never or have very, very rarely ever been shared any information.
Well, I think
So,
I found that out.
You know,
I don't know anything. So why bother to sign?
Right,
So.
so, Yeah, so, I mean, and I do believe, I mean, you know, these city councils, this is a tough thing for them to do. They don't run to be on city council to run an electric utility. You know, they don't have that knowledge, and, you know, they rely very heavily on staff for that information. And staff does an excellent job, as we all know. We have great service here in the Tri-Cities. We very, very rarely experience outages and things like that. So it runs, and so that's one reason why people don't question it, because it does run well. Yeah. So, anybody else? Yes.
Just wanted to make you all mad before you leave for the night, in hopes that you'll join the lobby day and possibly do an action and call your legislator. I work at Vote Solar with Covey. It's an honor and privilege. And I'm also uncle to Will Percorny in the back row there, who is the next generation of leaders helping but I'm here to continue. Maureen, right? That example from Memphis keeps me up at night. That was for XAI, and they installed something like 30 gas plants on site, essentially jet engines, like attached to the data center. And they said, trust us, we'll only use those when we absolutely need them. We can never use more than 6 at a time. And so they came in, they built those plants, immediately started firing them all in all cylinders, because it was cheaper than buying it from the grid. The neighborhood around that data center is already one of the most overburdened in the country for asthma and air issues. And the air quality, the AQI that we all track, it tripled just in a week or so. It was enough power just from those gas plants to power 280,000 homes. That's how hungry these data centers are. And that's how willing they are to get away with it if there aren't laws or rules helping to protect them and rein that in. And I know that before I left on parental leave a couple weeks ago, the data centers were primarily saying, trust us. Is that still the case? So they're down in Springfield saying, trust us, right? We'll do the right thing. And that hasn't gone well in other parts of the country. And if we can trust them, if they're gonna do the right thing on here, then they wouldn't mind these very simple rules being put on them to bring their own new clean energy. So highly encouraged. This is like a moving target over the next couple of weeks. So every single call to legislators right now, today, tomorrow, goes a long way. That's not a question. That's just, you're saying 2 cents. But thanks everybody for coming.
Since this has come up a couple of times, I can definitely say to you in no uncertain terms that when I was a lawyer, I did not ask a client to sign a contract because their opposing party said, trust me. I would never do that. I would never have done that and never did do that. And I actually was never asked to do that. But, you know, that what you said is true. That's what so many of these entities are saying to us. Trust us. We'll put clean energy in. We'll provide our own. We'll pay for it. But if it's not in black and white, and it's not written down on paper, or it's not in a statute telling them they have to do it, they're not going to do it when it becomes inconvenient to do it. Period. Period. So, any other questions, comments? Please go out and get your legislators. I hope you all know who they are. We have a raft of them here. We have Maura Hirschauer, Matt Hansen, Barbara Hernandez, and Dan Ugasti for the House. We have Linda Holmes, Karina Villa, and Don DeWitt in the Senate. Whoever is one of yours, please encourage them to co-sponsor and support this legislation. We desperately need it. Thank you so much for coming. Mavis?
And get on the bus, Gus.
Oh, yes, and get on the bus, Gus. There will be a bus from Naperville, I know.
Okay.
So,
The Unitary Church.